All right, everyone, welcome back. This is Lecture 19, Part 3, Digital Distribution and Digital Rights Management. This becomes part of gaming with the PC in the 128-bit era. So Steam from Valve Software, these again are the same company that has made Half-Life and Half-Life 2, created a digital distribution platform for PC games, Steam. So it comes out in 2003. It's similar to iTunes. iTunes was first in 2001 with the first iPod. And so that was one of the first big mainstream ways people got used to the idea of digitally purchasing their media as opposed to going to the store and buying a CD. And it's a big change. So digital distribution is simply allowing users to download and purchase digital copies of games or movies or music or whatever it is. So no physical media. This is a big switch. I mean, keep in mind, physical media has been around since the late 1890s with the wax tubes and the old Victrola records and stuff. So the idea of paying money for something that only exists digitally was very new in 2001 and with iTunes, then with 2003 with Valve. Now it has a lot of benefits and a lot of good reasons that that's the main way we consume media now. But there's some drawbacks as well, and we'll talk about those. Basically, when you go on Steam and you buy a game, it requires Steam to be running in order for them to be playable. This was even true of Half-Life 2. When you went to buy Half-Life 2 in the store, you still had to activate it via Steam, which a lot of people didn't like. Remember, prior to this, you would go to the game store or the Walmart or whatever, you'd buy your game disc, you'd put it in your PC, you'd put it in your game console, and it just worked. You didn't have to do anything else. Um, there were problems with things where Valve servers went down and then Steam wouldn't authenticate your game. And so you couldn't play your game. This has been fixed in later versions of Steam, but initially these sort of issues kept cropping up. However, digital distribution is the way most of you are used to consuming media, and it's by far the norm. So let's talk about why that is. I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm thinking of another slide. Let's keep talking about Steam for a second. Steam later did things like have friends lists. You could digitally gift games to people. You can search through their game catalog for particular kinds of games. One of the things about Steam that's kind of problematic at times is that Steam is by far the most dominant platform for PC game sales digitally, and Valve is also a maker of PC games. So Valve has the ability to, for example, when Half-Life Alyx VR came out, they can make that the big first thing you see on the Steam homepage every day. And there are companies who complain that this is in fact a conflict of interest for Steam, simply because they can manipulate the store any way they see fit, and they can give preference to their own games, which doesn't necessarily seem fair to other game developers. They can do this also with Dota 2 and any title that is produced by Valve, essentially, right? Steam also functions as a digital rights management tool for games purchased through the service. Let's take a quick look at Steam as it exists today. So here's Steam. Here's the front store page, if you're not familiar with it. So as you can see, this game has got an update that's available. Here's the games, Black Mesa 1.0. These are sort of the featured and recommended games. Some of this is tailored to because Steam also knows what else I play on their service or what other games I've previously purchased from them. So they sort of select these to try to entice you to buy. They always have sales. It's endless. There's the big Steam sale several times a year. Games get very cheap. Kerbal Space Program is normally $40. Right now it's on sale for $10. So Octopath Traveler, which originally came out on the Switch, is now $30 for a week or so. Monolith, who's made these games, they're all on sale over the weekend. Get Grand Theft Auto 5 for $15. I mean, it's just endless. I mean, look at all the categories of games they have. You can browse top sellers, recently updated, new releases, browse by genre. I only like RPG games, or I only like adventure games. Um, Players who play the same games as me like these games. Here's a bunch more special offers in case I wasn't enticed by the. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the same one. Excuse me. Steam Labs. So here's again Half-Life Alyx in the VR. They're very prominently pasted on the page. This is a Valve game. Here's things that you might be interested in, Don. Look at all these games. You can manage your game library through here. So it shows you all the games you own and which ones you have installed and all that stuff. There's a community, so you can go to what have my friends been doing? What does Valve want me to pay attention to? That's me. That's my profile. Let's go back to the store. They also have the friends list functionality, so I can see who are my friends online. Here's Lycan playing Borderlands 3. Here's some friends online. Nobody's playing anything right now. But friends, and you can chat with your friends. You can voice chat through here while you're playing games together. You can voice chat through here while you're doing different games. So it's got a lot of functionality as a platform. So that's Steam sort of in a nutshell. Wildly popular, it is the dominant platform for digital PC game development, though Epic Game Store is more recently challenging it. So we'll end up seeing how that goes down the road. So why digital distribution? Why has everyone moved to this model? Well, for providers of media, it's cheaper distribution and storage, right? It's one thing to have one copy of a game that I can sell 1,000,000 times because every copy is perfect because it's a digital copyright. It's just zeros and ones, versus having to have a physical store where I only have so much shelf space and I need to fill it with, 100 copies of Halo or 100 copies of Half-Life 2. That costs way more than having a digital version of it. For consumers, it's convenient, right? Steam is online 24/7, 365 days a year. Do I need a new game? Great, let's see what's on Steam today. Is there a big sale? Well, let me take a look. Maybe there's some hot games that I missed that are now affordable for me. There's just more choice, right? Again, it gets into that physical media versus digital issue where the digital stores can offer me literally millions, or not millions, that may be a little unreasonable. Let's say there's 30,000 games on Steam. There's no physical location I can go to and have any sort of meaningful search through 30,000 games. For game developers, it's much easier to enter the market, right? Uploading code that plays game is way simpler than getting a licensing deal with a console maker and then physically manufacturing discs and then arranging Target or Walmart or GameStop to buy those discs and then ship them to the locations, then get people. Much easier to just do it digitally. The long tail, which we'll talk about in a minute, is a huge advantage of digital distribution, both for the publishers and consumers. And digital distribution, and it starts with Steam and it eventually goes to the Microsoft Xbox Store and the PlayStation Store and the Nintendo Switch, the eShop, all that stuff, is that you don't necessarily have to take your game to a traditional publisher. Previously, if you wanted to make a game, you would have to go to Activision or EA or some big publisher and be like, I've got this great idea and here's a demo. Can you please, fund my game to be made? With digital distribution, they don't have to do that. The Stardew Valley is a good example of this, right? That's a game made essentially by one person. He worked on it for many years, and then he just made it digitally available through Steam and other outlets, and of course, wildly successful. So having these platforms gives game developers a lot of options. Most student projects, for example, go through digital, right? Because physical is just not really feasible at that stage. There's some disadvantages to digital distribution that you should also be aware of. Digital rights management, or DRM, determines what you can and can't do with your digital property that affects you as a consumer, right? I buy all this physical media, I buy all this digital media, right? I've got music and games and movies and whatnot. But DRM determines what I can do with it and what screen it's available on. I don't own a physical copy of this. So what happens to all our Steam games if Valve decides to shut down tomorrow and they all go buy a private island and just leave? Do I keep my games? Are those my games? And for developers, it's a double-edged sword, right? I think last year on Steam, they released almost 7,000 or 8,000 games, or maybe more than that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But because it's much easier to sort of self-publish your game on these digital distribution platforms, I suddenly have to sort of, as a consumer, I have to, search through all these games, and as a developer, I certainly have to be aware of the fact that there are 7,000 new games in a year on Steam. How's my game going to stand out or be noticed? So digital distribution is clearly the dominant form of media distribution today. It's how we consume most of our media, but it does have some issues to be aware of. So this is a graph describing the long tail. So the way this works, and this came out from Chris Anderson of Wired Games, and what's going on here is this red part represents sales of like a hit game. So this, you could think of this as Animal Crossing this week or Doom Eternal, right? They're the hot new games of this week. They're the big releases for the month. So they're selling lots and lots of copies each. What the long tail represents is all the other games that are being sold digitally at the same time. So why this is very popular and is driving a lot of sales, I'll be selling, this is one product being sold a whole bunch of times. This is a whole bunch of titles selling one or two copies each. But with digital distribution, this long tail of sales of one or two or three or four or five or six or seven, eight or 1,000 titles can actually be more lucrative than the sales of the hit game. So let's take a look at kind of how the idea of this came about. So this is a retail strategy described by Chris Anderson of Wired Magazine. And basically it says the sum of niche or catalog titles can equal or exceed the sales of the hit or popular new titles. The first example he used of this was Amazon. And this was a real world example, it's not digital. Amazon, because it just keeps things in a giant warehouse, can stock way more catalog book titles than a traditional brick and mortar store, excuse me. So the easy example is in a given day, Amazon may sell 10,000 copies of one hit book while selling 15,000 catalog books. This Amazon can make just as much or more money from the long tail, or from the selling less of more items, is another way to think of it. Now let's think about this in terms of digital gaming. How much do you think it costs Steam or Apple to carry one more digital title in their stores? It's like less than pennies, right? They have huge server farms. Adding another 2 GB of code is nothing. So digital distribution allows companies to offer almost an unlimited number of games, which allows them to take advantage of the long tail all the time. So an example of this, and I made a typo here, I'm sorry, is essentially, let's say a new game like Grand Theft Auto 5 when it was new. All right, let's think of Doom Eternal maybe. So Steam sells 1,000 copies of that this week, and for $50 each, so they get 50,000 in sales. In the same week, they may sell Amnesia: The Dark Descent, which is an older title, for $10, 500 copies of Saints Row, which is a really old game now, for $25, 20 copies of Ticket to Ride for $30 for $600, 750 copies of this, and their Midweek Madness sale. And what I want you to see here is by selling less of a whole bunch more items, Steam or Valve through Steam can make more money than they might make from just all the sales of Doom Eternal. And the long tail in terms of digital distribution is always available, and it never goes away. They're never going to run out of space. So it's a really interesting thing, this idea that perhaps we could make just as much money selling stuff on sale or older titles for less money, but we just sell so many little batches of 2 and 3 and 10 and 100 that it actually the total sum of those sales in the long tail right here is actually greater than what the sales of the hit item of the week. So that's the idea of the long tail. You sell less of more stuff or more items. And digital distribution really makes that possible. All right, let's talk a little bit about digital rights management. And what that talks about, there's a whole bunch of technologies that do this, but it refers to how a product or service limits or manages the user's copyright holder's rights for a digital product. Essentially, how many computers can you install a game on through Steam? How many screens can I watch my movie on? How many copies of how many PCs can I install Microsoft Office on when I buy a copy of Microsoft Word? Games purchased through Steam are tied to your account. Now they can be downloaded and installed on any computer, but how many computers at a time? Purchased through Steam can't really be resold or traded in for a new purchase. So this was a big switch when we went to digital media, right? Steam has to know that Don Strauser bought that copy of Tomb Raider or whatever it is, and that it can be played on this machine because we've verified it. I can't take that copy of my game when I'm done with it and give it to my friend Cliff like I could with physical media, right? If I was playing a game on a disc-based game, right? I could just take it. Oh, this was fun. I'm done with it. Here you go, Cliff. You can now play this disc-based game. So digital rights management prevents that from happening because the game is actually tied to my account. This is true on the Xbox store, the eShop, on your phones, things like that. Steam usually has to be running it for games purchased through the service. They do have an offline mode, but I don't know how long you can run it, right? These games only exist on the platform that you bought them on. This is a big issue when you think about how big sometimes your media collections will get digitally. So other companies use things like Secure ROM and the Warden and Punkbuster. Those all go with other titles. And DRM exists sort of everywhere around us, right? It's the media we buy. If I buy it on the Microsoft store, it won't play on my PlayStation, right? If I buy it in the PlayStation store, it won't run on my iPhone. So digital rights management, it kind of ties you to different ecosystems as well as sort of determining what you can do with what you bought. This was not true of physical media, right? If I'm done with a disc-based game, I can just give it to somebody else. Well, I can't do that with a digital copy due to DRM. So, kind of summarizing DRM, my question is like, who owns this? Who owns your digital media? So, DRM determines when and how digital media can be accessed and shared. From the intellectual property holder's point of view, this is protection from piracy. It's important because digital copies are always perfect copies, and with internet, you can distribute anything anywhere, all the time, 24/7, 365, right? So, DRM is sort of a way to manage that. So, with that in mind, what about the digital media that you own? What about all those games you have on Steam? Do you own them? Or are you just licensing it for as long as the license holder or Steam makes it available, right? Whenever we install these PC games, we get a big rigmarole. It's the end user license agreement. You always have to click agree. What are you agreeing to? Do any of us really read those, right? Can I transfer my digital media, right? If I buy a digital copy of Get Out for $5 on the Microsoft Store on sale, can I uh, transfer that to anyone? Can I transfer it to a different platform? Is it available on more than one thing? So DRM really sort of acts as a way to sort of either keep you in an ecosystem or really telling you just what you can do with what you bought. Um, right now, there's a lot of things have gone subscription based. You don't buy things. I'm just going to continuously pay for access versus owning them. And how does that impact DRM, right? Another issue that has not been crossed with is what happens to your digital stuff when someone dies, right? For those of us, or for those of you who are growing up in an all digital world, or those of us who've amassed big collections, thousands of dollars worth of digital media, what happens to it, right? That was licensed to me. It wasn't licensed to my family for indefinite use, right? So who owns the stuff that we play and watch and listen to every day? So those important questions to think about. DRM, as far as class is concerned, is really just about how license holders or intellectual property holders use digital rights management technology to control access to their games and how it's shared. But it is something you consider when you think about how much stuff you consume digitally. All right, this lecture is going a little bit long. Part of the lecture is going a little bit long. I want to wrap it up. So, reviewing PC gaming, we're dominated by the large franchises. Steam brings digital distribution to the PC gaming market. With the release of Steam, PC gaming is going to have to deal with DRM. And we talked about the recruiting tool and the issue of addiction. Going along with this, the widespread adoption of broadband throughout the United States and online gaming on PC is becoming very, very standardized. All right, that's it for lecture 19. Uh, Stay safe and be well, and we'll talk to you all later. Bye bye.